All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Caitlin Blanco with Not My Kid, a nonprofit dedicated to providing the highest quality prevention and behavioral health programs for kids, families, and communities. We are here today with Partnership to End Addiction, a national nonprofit based in New York City. Partnership's mission is to transform how our nation addresses addiction by empowering families, shaping public policy, and changing culture. We have Dr. Linda Richter. She is the Senior Vice President of Prevention Research and Analysis at Partnership to End Addiction, where she conducts research on the nature, scope, predictors, and consequences of all forms of substance use and addiction, especially among young people. And we also have Corey Hammond, who joins this team as the Director of Prevention Services. Partnerships Prevention Team leverages research to help raise awareness among parents, educators, health professionals, and policymakers about best practices in substance use prevention and addiction care. Today, we're diving deep into raising well-rested teens. This information is key to building a strong foundation of prevention programs in communities. So thank you, Linda and Corey, for being here, and I will pass it to you both.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the November installment of our webinars. We're really excited to bring this topic to you. I know in the intro, you heard a lot about Partnership to End Addiction, and you may be wondering, what does that have to do with sleep? Hopefully, by the end of this webinar, the relationship between the two will be made clear. I wanted to shout out, obviously you can see Linda and myself here, but also we developed this presentation with the help of one of our project coordinators, Nick. So wanted to give him a shout out. And so here is what we're going to be going over today. And as we're going through all of this information, if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat function or the Q&A function, and we will hopefully have time for them at the end. We're going to talk about the importance of sleep for teens. We hear a lot about different health aspects when it comes to young people, physical health, mental health, substance use, that sleep doesn't really get talked about maybe as much as it should. We're going to talk about how common teen sleep loss is. We'll talk about what some of the common barriers to good sleep are. We will talk about the consequences of getting insufficient or inadequate sleep. We're going to make clear that relationship between substance use and sleep. We'll talk about the benefits of healthy sleep, how we can get better sleep with our teens, so tips and strategies for that, and then some resources and support at the end. And then hopefully have some time for Q&A. And so I wanted to jump right into it. So why is sleep so important in general, but specifically, why is it so important for those who are in their teenage years? Sleep plays a fundamental role in teens' lives. And so if we're not already well aware of it, we should know that that sleep is so important for physical health and growth. It's very important for, crucial physical development during puberty when so many different changes are happening in the teenage body. Sleep also powers the brain. So our brains require good sleep to learn and recall information each day. It's really integral to memory and learning. Sleep also protects our mental health. So sleep is a really powerful guard for mental health. It helps teens to manage their moods and emotions and other issues that crop up. It also helps us to facilitate safer choices. Well-rested teens are better at making decisions and controlling their impulses. It helps to boost academic and social success. Adequate sleep is directly connected with better grades, healthier relationships, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. And it's also just a foundation of long-term health. We'll talk a lot about how certainly sleep is important for short-term health, You know, if you sleep terribly the night before, your day ends up at a disadvantage, but it's also really important for long-term health. And sleep in childhood and adolescence is really important for health as an adult. And that relationship might not seem totally apparent to everybody, but we hope that we will provide enough research and facts to help make that self-evident. And so what is good sleep? You know, it's important to recognize that it's not only about the number of hours that someone sleeps. It's really a multifaceted idea and has different components. So certainly the first one is quantity, just the amount. The hours do matter, but also the quality matters. And so having uninterrupted deep sleep, you might have heard a lot about the sleep cycle. And so we want to have that sleep cycle uninterrupted. But also regularity matters. So having a routine and consistency matters. You know, our bodies thrive on routines. And so we want teens to set that internal clock and protect kind of the routine of it. And then the timing matters too. So, you know, we want people to get we want teens to get, as I will say later, 8 and 12 hours of sleep, but it matters when in the day that happens. So it's not just about getting a few hours here and a few hours here and a few hours here. The timing of when all of those hours line up makes a big difference. So the sleep and the wake time. And best case scenario, we want that to line up with our biological clock, which is probably a term you've heard before. And that differs between teens and adults. And so we'll talk about that in a moment. But these 4 things are really important to have good sleep. You may have heard of something called the circadian rhythm. And so that's our internal clock. That's the biological clock. It's an internal clock that helps us to regulate our sleep and our wake cycle. It's very much influenced by light exposure. Makes sense that humans are naturally wired to fall asleep at night and wake up during the day. It also helps us to keep us alert during the day. And it helps us to wind down at night. And so disruption of this circadian rhythm can really affect our sleep, but it can also affect our mood and lead to certain health issues. So irregular sleep patterns, having too much light coming into your bedroom at night, can lead to a lot of issues with this circadian rhythm. And this is important to talk about specifically in teenage years because the circadian rhythm shifts for teenagers. If we see this graph on the right here, the x-axis at the bottom would be kind of the time of day. And so during puberty, teens experience a shift in this rhythm. And it's different for everyone, but it's about a 2-hour shift where they start feeling sleepier later at night. So if you have kids, you may wonder why those teens stay up later than when they were younger, and it's because of this circadian shift. So some teens might not naturally feel sleepy until 11 p.m. And so it's a mismatch because school schedules force teens naturally to wake up before this kind of natural rhythm would be usually completed. So it may feel very natural for teens to fall asleep at 11 o'clock or midnight and then get a full, 8 or 10 hours of sleep and wake up at 8, 9, 10 a.m. When we know that school doesn't really allow them to do that. So this leads to chronic sleep deprivation, or what would be called social jet lag, or some of us might know it as the Mondays, where teens struggle to adjust back to early mornings after the weekend. And so having sleep regularity and a really set routine can help to balance that internal clock. And so this diagram shows the recommended sleep duration for different age groups. As we can see, this is from the experts at sleepeducation.org, which is the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. And they recommend that teenagers need at least 8 hours of sleep a night, if not more, for optimal health and development, with 10 hours being kind of the ideal. And you'll see that as people get older, they need less sleep. For newborns and babies, you see ideally they're sleeping 16 hours a day. Then as someone gets into toddlerhood, it goes down a little bit. For our younger adolescents, 6 to 12 years old, bare minimum of 9 hours, ideally 12 hours. And then for those 18 and up, 7 or more is kind of the standard. And so seeing those standards, it might feel pretty obvious that most people are not getting enough sleep. And so this is very common. You'll see, this is data from the CDC, that when it comes to middle schoolers, 6 out of 10 middle schoolers are not getting the recommended amount of sleep. 7 out of 10 high schoolers are not getting the recommended amount of sleep. There was a survey that showed about 73% of high schoolers were not getting the recommended amount. And even for adults, 4 out of 10 adults are not getting at least 7 hours every night. And so there's certainly a clear need for sleep improvement among everybody, but we'll talk about why it's so important for teens specifically. And this graph is important to note that this is not a new problem. You know, it might be easy to blame smartphones or social media for why teens and people are not getting as much sleep as they should. But this graph goes back to 2009. So that was before teens were really kind of engrossed in social media all the time. And you'll see that goes up to 2021, just a few years ago, and it's largely the same. And it breaks it out between males and females as well. So this has really been a persistent problem over the decades. It's not just a new problem. You know, and so the amount of people who are not getting enough sleep has kind of stayed the same over a long time. And specifically in the US, this is data from the CDC's teen survey, the YRBS. And so the coloring here is kind of strange, like the darker orange is the teens who are getting the most sleep, and the kind of original, like the regular color orange, is those who are getting the least amount of sleep. And Arizona is higher than the national average for teens who are not getting enough sleep. So nationally, the average is about 77% of teens saying that they're not getting enough sleep, and Arizona is about 79%, so slightly higher than the national average. But you'll see it's pretty bad everywhere. None of these numbers are low. The lowest was South Dakota, where just over 70% of teens were saying that they're not getting enough sleep. And so why aren't people getting good sleep? What are some of the barriers? Here are some environmental barriers for why young people are not getting enough sleep. The first, which is an important one, is the early school start time. And I know that this is not one that we have a lot that we can do about, but most schools start before 8:30, which is what experts do not recommend. They advocate for a later start time. And they've done research to show that later start times of school has been shown to certainly allow kids to get more sleep, but also to boost mood and academic performance. There's also certainly school or work pressure. There's definitely times where kids come home and have too much homework to do, which forces them to stay up later. Definitely pressures at home, but also the setup of their room. There could be too much light coming in. There could be too much sound, depending on just where they live, and unpredictable surroundings. They might be in an area where it's tough to get a full night of quiet darkness where they can have a full, uninterrupted night of sleep. There's also individual barriers. So these are things like that sleep phase delay, that different circadian rhythm for teens, where while as much as they want to fall asleep at 9 p.m. to get their full 10 hours, they just might not be able to fall asleep that early. Certainly, screens and social media have a lot to do with it. Experts recommend having no screens for 30 minutes to an hour before bedtime, not having screens in the bedroom. We'll talk more about it, but certainly the white and blue light that comes through from a cell phone screen can really impact that circadian rhythm and make it difficult to fall asleep. Definitely stress has an impact. I'm sure we can all think of moments where stress has kept us up at night and made it difficult to fall asleep. And we know that kids are very stressed these days. We know that a lack of exercise can make it difficult to fall asleep at night. Certainly, mental health conditions like anxiety or depression can make it difficult to fall asleep and stay asleep. We'll talk about it soon, but substance use, caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, other drugs can severely disrupt the sleep cycle, affecting both the quality of sleep that you get and the amount of sleep. And then there's other sleep disorders that most of them are more common in adults, but there's certainly teens that have difficulties with things like insomnia, sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome. So there's certainly medical disorders that make it difficult to sleep. And so what are the consequences of not getting enough sleep? It's more serious than just feeling tired the next day. So when kids don't get enough sleep, their functioning is worse. There's impaired focus and learning. Their school performance may suffer. They might have behavioral problems. Their relationships might suffer. And just in general, we know that lack of sleep leads to worse mental health. Not getting enough sleep also puts young people at a higher risk of weight gain, diabetes, injuries, substance use, and then certainly substance use disorders, and all-cause mortality. Not getting enough sleep has been linked to a higher risk of many serious health problems and even just a shorter lifespan in general. Specifically about mental health, teens who don't get enough sleep are twice as likely to experience symptoms of depression. About 31% of teens who didn't get enough sleep experience symptoms of depression compared to 12% of well-rested teens. So it's a lot more serious than just they're tired during the day. It does have an impact on so many facets of well-being. More risks linked to poor sleep. Sleep deprivation lowers our ability to think through consequences, and this is especially true for teenagers. Poor sleep is linked to unsafe sexual behavior. It increases that impulsivity that can make teens more likely to engage in risky sexual behavior. Drowsy driving. Sleep-deprived teens, there's research that shows are just as dangerous as alcohol-impaired drivers. Certainly, we're concerned about teen safety while driving in general, when they're well rested. So certainly having teens that are drowsy and falling asleep at the wheel is a massive problem. Each year, there's a lot of sleep-related vehicle fatalities. And again, teens are especially at risk due to that natural shift in that circadian rhythm, where waking up and having to drive to school might be unsafe for them. And then also kind of more serious about the mental health aspect, teens with chronic sleep deprivation are 3 times more likely to experience suicidal thoughts compared to teens that are not chronically sleep deprived. So there is a deep connection between the amount of sleep that someone gets and their mental health. Teens who sleep fewer than 7 hours per night are 68% more likely to exhibit risk factors linked with suicide. So there's a connection there that we certainly want to be aware of. And naturally, because we are a partnership to end addiction and we're concerned about preventing substance use, we wanted to link substance use and sleep because it's a connection that some people might not make all the time. There's a connection between not getting enough sleep in childhood and future substance use. So there was really very interesting research that followed people longitudinally that showed that adolescents are more likely to have consumed alcohol or tried marijuana by age 15 if they had a later bedtime in childhood. And they went on to show that teens were 45% more likely to have tried alcohol by age 15 if they had a later bedtime at age 9, when compared to those who had an earlier bedtime at age 9. And this is important because if you've been with us for any of our other webinars, you will have learned that the earlier someone starts using substances, the greater their chance that they will have a substance use disorder. And so trying alcohol by age 15, we know puts someone at high risk for a substance use disorder with alcohol later in life. And in this study, they controlled for parental substance use. So it wasn't a factor in kind of like their genetic history or whether or not they had family history of substances. And so part of what the researchers think might be the relationship here is that shorter sleep duration, so getting less sleep, and later bedtimes may increase impulsivity in kids and impair their decision making over time. And so it's very interesting to think about, when we're trying to prevent substance use, something as simple as just making sure that you're getting enough sleep in childhood can really make a big difference. They also showed that overtiredness in childhood predicted lower response inhibition. So being more tired led kids to be more impulsive and less likely to think critically and avoid kind of dangerous or unsafe behaviors. And so they showed that they were able to predict the number of illicit drugs used in young adulthood based on the overtiredness in the child. And so they also showed that overtiredness in childhood was a direct predictor for the presence of binge drinking, blackouts, driving after drinking, and the number of lifetime alcohol problems. And so we don't just want to think about a bad night's sleep and sleeping poorly as just affecting the next day. As a whole, the amount of sleep that someone gets during childhood can be a predictor for their future health as an adult. And sure, feeling tired the next day and having a bad night of sleep feels bad, but it's a lot bigger than that. We want kids to have the healthiest futures possible, and the amount of sleep that they're getting now in their childhood is a huge factor in that. And so we're definitely worried about childhood sleep and how that relates to substance use risk, but we're also worried about the short-term consequences of lack of sleep in teens and how that relates to their motivation to use substances. And so we may think of some substances that are commonly used to stay awake, things like caffeine and nicotine. If you've ever, I'm sure a lot of us are caffeine drinkers. If you slept poorly the night before, you might drink a little more coffee the next day to try to stay alert. And so caffeine is the stimulant that's in coffee, energy drinks, sodas. It can stay in the body for up to 6 hours and can really delay sleep and reduce the quality of sleep that we get. And then things like nicotine are also stimulants that can help to keep people awake. Nicotine is certainly found in cigarettes and vapes, but it's also found in some gums now and mouth pouches like Zyn, sources of nicotine. And nicotine also disrupts the sleep cycle and can lead to lighter, less restorative sleep. And then on the other hand, we know that there's some substances that are commonly used by people who want to fall asleep or to help address insomnia. So certainly alcohol is a depressant and might make it easier to fall asleep in the moment, but we know that it disrupts the deep sleep that's necessary to feel well rested the next day, so leads to a less kind of high quality rest. And then also marijuana. So marijuana is a psychoactive drug that a lot of people use to help make them sleepy at night. They typically report that it helps them to fall asleep. But over time, kind of similar to alcohol, it cuts into that deep sleep and can help that can help us with our memory and our learning. And so marijuana use for sleep can impact that. But then also people can become dependent on marijuana to fall asleep. So that if they go without it, they're incapable of sleeping and their insomnia can get worse. And so unfortunately, this can lead to this cycle where we're totally dependent on substances for kind of all parts of our day, where if we have poor sleep, we're reaching for caffeine, and then that caffeine or nicotine or other stimulants is causing us to have poor sleep to begin with because we can't fall asleep. So then we're reaching for things to help treat our insomnia. So then we're reaching for marijuana or other depressants like alcohol to help us fall asleep, which then impacts our deep sleep. So we're less well rested to begin with. So then we need more stimulants, and it turns into this cycle that can be really hard to break out of. And meanwhile, all of these substances are decreasing our focus, they're increasing our irritability, lower performance in job or in school, and kind of worsening our mental health. And so this cycle can be really detrimental on many different fronts. And a lot of, especially students that are concerned about their grades, they might be using stimulants to stay up and study, and then disrupting their sleep cycle, and then trying to use other substances to get their sleep cycle back on track when they have more time. And it's a very deep cycle of dependency that can certainly increase the risk that someone will develop a substance use disorder if they're finding that they're dependent on things to fall asleep or they're dependent on things to stay awake during the day. It is kind of a slippery slope towards addiction and substance use disorders. And so now I'm going to pass it off to Linda to talk about all of the good things that healthy sleep can do for us and what some of the tips and strategies are as parents that people can utilize to try to help out their teens.
Thanks, Corey, and thanks for finally letting me be the positive one instead of the doom and gloom presenter. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the benefits of healthy sleep are clearly the opposite of the negative consequences of unhealthy sleep, but I'd like to kind of highlight a few that we haven't really discussed or delve a little bit deeper into some of these. So first, there are benefits in terms of school and one's social environment. When teens get enough sleep, they kind of unlock this potential that they have at school. And it's not just in terms of getting better grades, but their overall cognitive functioning or, decision-making, judgment, thinking skills, memory, those all improve. They have better focus, better memory, which are critical for academic performance. And that does actually translate into better grades, better classroom behavior as well, which our educators, teachers, et cetera, really appreciate, which is why I know when my kids were very little, the kindergarten teachers used to say one thing to the parents literally every day: all I need you to do with your kids, I don't care if they don't know their ABCs, if you don't read to them, no matter what, just make sure they get a good night's sleep and they come back to school the next day well rested, and we'll handle the rest. It is such an imperative for kids to function well in school. But beyond schoolwork, it really helps kids function better socially and get along with their peers and behave better with their teachers. And all that leads to more positive social interactions, more investment in school, getting more out of their academics. And we even find some research showing that that leads to improved graduation rates. So we have some real concrete data showing how good sleep improves academic performance beyond just, on the individual level. We also know that there are significant benefits to the individual's well-being. So good sleep is certainly foundational for emotional stability. It really protects against symptoms of anxiety, of depression, of stress, and health problems more broadly. So we know that good sleep is very tightly linked to preventing a whole range of health issues, including hypertension, some of which show up more later in life and that we're not as concerned about when it comes to younger kids or teenagers. But it does actually prevent things that we are very concerned about with younger kids and teenagers, such as mental health issues, substance use, as Corey mentioned, and substance use disorders. So, there's really a very tight link between good sleep and these things that we talk about constantly in our presentations and that I know you think a lot about at home when it comes to your own family. And then there's the family dynamics and cohesion that sees a lot of benefits from good sleep. So for the family, when a teenager or younger child gets enough sleep, we're going to see more harmonious family interactions and dynamics. Well-rested teens and kids are less irritable. They're less likely to get into conflicts and fights with their siblings, with the parents. And you could really see notable changes in the family dynamics when we start to see improved sleep patterns and quality. Um, we also know that the reverse is true. When you have improved family dynamics and interactions, you're going to see more improved sleep in your kids because it reduces their stress, it reduces those negative feelings, those intrusive thoughts that kind of interrupt the sleep cycle. So this is kind of a bidirectional relationship. The better sleep the kids are getting, the better the family dynamics, and usually the better the family dynamics, the better the kids and parents will sleep. And there's even community benefits. So it doesn't just affect the individuals and the families, but it really tends to have ripple effects across the entire community. We know that when people, and especially teenagers, get more sleep, they tend to feel healthier and happier, to function in a more adaptive way, and that can improve their relationship with others. It can increase their productivity in school, in the workplace. It could improve how they interact in the community just more generally. Maybe they have more energy for engaging in pro-social activities, volunteering, doing a better job at work, whatever activities they're engaged in, performing better in sports activities or other arts that they're involved in. But one really powerful example that we're very that is quite important for the community-wide benefits of better sleep comes from a study that was done on school start times, as Corey was mentioning, and teen motor vehicle crashes. And the researchers really found that after just delaying school start times by 1 hour, teens averaged more nightly sleep. They relied less on catch-up sleep over the weekend, but most importantly, car crash rates among teen drivers dropped by almost 17% over the course of 2 years. I mean, that is a tremendous effect and quite significant when it comes to injuries and even deaths related to car crashes. So improved sleep can really enhance safety on the community level, relationships on the community level, and productivity, both academic and in the workplace as well. So we want to just talk about a couple of tips and strategies to help improve teen sleep. We're going to start with this little video that's quite nice. It was put out by this really nice, good organization, and it shows the teen perspective. And it was originally designed to speak directly to teens, but I think there's a lot of great information in there for parents as well. So Corey, if you can get that going, I'd appreciate it. We did just practice it. I did practice.
more time for it up.
Sorry, I'm not hearing you, Corey.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, well, that's a little choppy and I haven't seen the video. Am I frozen or are you frozen?
No, I think you're good. I think it's me.
Okay,
Sorry,
so
I think it's me.
all right, I'll just take it from here.
We'll go back to the video at the end and I'll see if I can get it work.
Okay. Um, Let me see if I could share.
Sorry, is it better now?
Your voice is better, but it's not loading.
Can you not see the screen?
Yeah, I see it now. So we'll go back to the video in a bit and we'll just continue here. Okay, Corey, you seem like you're back now. So here are some signs. The first thing we'd like to say, we'll go back to that video later, is that it's really important to look for signs of sleep problems. So you can't address a problem if you don't know that it's happening. And there are certain things to really keep your eyes open for in terms of warning signs. Some of these are things like a child who has trouble waking up most mornings. Now, we don't want to catastrophize and make everything into an issue. All teenagers, all people have a hard time waking up in the mornings. But when it's really kind of, you try and the child just is not getting up and is putting up a lot of resistance. If there's a lot of irritability in the early afternoon, if the teacher is letting you know that the child is falling asleep in class a lot, if there's a sudden drop in grades or in social interactions or dynamics, and when a child is really sleeping a lot on weekends, trying to, either get some caught up on the missed sleep during the week. Obviously, kids do sleep for longer hours on the weekend than they do during the week. But if it's dramatically different, then that's a sign that they're just not getting enough sleep. It's also important to know that sleep problems can sometimes mimic symptoms of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. And it's good to kind of have that in your mind so that no conclusion is jumped to, but that you kind of just understand that. So both can lead to difficulty in concentrating, to mood swings, hyperactivity, maybe some incidents of aggression. And if your child is showing some of these behaviors or signs, it's really worth considering before we jump to an ADHD diagnosis, whether sleep is a factor. It is good to talk to a pediatrician about this or a mental health professional or school counselor. And pediatricians tend to emphasize that identification and treatment of an underlying sleep disorder can actually improve or sometimes even resolve some ADHD symptoms in some children and adolescents. So sleep is really like that magic bullet to at least try before we move on to other concerns when it comes to our children. And if neither sleep nor ADHD are the root causes of the problem, then we kind of want to start this conversation with the child's healthcare provider to see what could be causing these issues. Some parents could really follow these, strategies and looking for the right signs, but they still can have some significant struggles in getting children to bed, especially younger kids, but not only. So things like nightmares, bedwetting, refusing or resisting sleep, and anxiety are all potential struggles that we might see in younger children and some older children as well. And some of these could be out of the realm of what parents can handle on their own. They may need to recruit the help of a pediatrician or a counselor, a mental health professional. But what we try and do is really do our best to address these on our own at first. So there could be little things that could really make a huge difference. Maybe getting a nightlight or a sound machine to help soothe an anxious sleeper. Maybe allowing children to read a book quietly in bed or participate in some nighttime routines that can help allay some of their sleep refusal or resistance. So again, the main thing to do is to not jump to this anger and accusing and blame and shame, but to really try and understand what is driving the issues. So if parents are working to try and improve their child's sleep by encouraging consistent bedtime, no screens before bed, all those things, they might still get some struggle and pushback. But it's really important, as is true of any difficult issue we encounter with our kids, is to understand what is driving the behavior and to try and take a health rather than a punitive approach. I've been there with a child who wakes up at 4 in the morning and won't get back to sleep. It's really frustrating. Parents are at their, wits' end at that time of night. They just want that peace in the evening to kind of do their own thing, or they don't want to be woken up at night and all that when it comes to a younger child. But it's really important to not resort to shaming and blaming and losing our cool, but to really try to understand what is getting in the way of a child's sleep, and try to address those as best as we can. Back to this school start time. It is a huge issue, which is why we keep repeating it. And there is movement on this, as Corey was mentioning. Parents of students in districts that have adjusted their school start times report that their kids get more quality sleep and are less tired, and it persists over time. Early school start times really get in the way of a whole range of issues for kids that we're trying to avoid. And the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, recommend that school start no later than 8:30 a.m. This is true for middle and high school. Nevertheless, only about 17% of public schools in the United States are following this recommendation. There are really good movements to kind of push this through in other districts, and it's something worth getting behind if you have that opportunity. The research is pretty clear. When schools follow this recommendation and move start times later, we see that students have more sleep, their sleep time is better, they have fewer signs of depression, less substance use, fewer car crashes are recorded. There's all sorts of a whole range of academic improvements that are found, reductions in missing school, in tardiness and suspensions. We see that states have higher achievements test scores in those states where they have made these changes, higher grades, and more long-term productivity for the people who have these kind of later start times, and which saves costs and is just good overall. So just quickly, what else can parents do? It's really important to manage the child's environment that they're in so that they have a good opportunity to sleep as best as possible. So these are things like, again, ensuring that the bedroom is generally quiet, dark, and cool. As much as possible, we're getting those phones and screens and laptops out of our kids' rooms and tablets. Don't just assume if you take their phone that they can't do everything else on their computer. They can. So as much as possible, and this goes into the teenage years, to get that out of the room. And if they say, oh, well, how am I going to wake up in the morning? You buy them a good old-fashioned alarm clock. And we should do the same for ourselves, adults. We want to not impose all this on kids. We want to really try and be partners with them as much as possible so that they can understand the value of it. So we could set this bedtime together, discuss these sort of sleep-friendly habits together, help establish together a routine for winding down in the evening. And again, limiting caffeine in the afternoon for kids and for ourselves if possible. And advocating for our kids. We want to contact their school or work if there's too much pressure on them to stay up late doing schoolwork or working long hours that can affect their sleep health. And if necessary, talking to our kids' pediatricians or other healthcare providers to see how else we can help them get good sleep, given how important it is. Again, a couple more pointers that I just wanted to discuss here is we want to stick to a regular schedule for our kids as much as possible. And again, that goes back to this weekend issue or vacation. Often, obviously, kids will want to sleep later on the weekend and on vacation, and that's fine. But we don't want those dramatic shifts where they're getting up at 7 in the morning or 6 in the morning during the week and at 11 a.m. or 12 p.m. During the weekend. It disrupts the sleep schedule. It's very unhealthy for kids and for adults as well. So as much as we can kind of keep to a routine, the better it is. You know, this disconnecting from the screens and all that should start at least 30 minutes before bedtime, preferably even an hour before bedtime. They stimulate our brain in a way that just makes it harder to fall asleep and harder to stay asleep. So we may say, oh, this is not a problem for our kids. They fall asleep right away. Well, they may, but they may have more disrupted sleep during the night. Again, issues about like dimming the indoor lights or turning off some of the lights as night approaches. Our brains are very, very sensitive to light. We are now living in an artificial light world, and we have been for, you know, since the dawn of electricity, but that's not how we have evolved. So we have evolved to kind of, you know, power down as the sun sets. And obviously that's not how we live right now. So we try to mimic that as best as we can. Likewise, getting bright light in the morning when our children wake up, that could really help as well. Encouraging enough physical activity during the day. And one that I would really like to emphasize is us modeling as parents good sleep habits and good sleep attitudes. So, you know, there's this tendency for adults to be like, I never get enough sleep. Who has time for sleep? I'm so busy. I have so much to do. I could function on 3 hours a night or 4 hours a night or 5 hours a night. Those are really not helpful messages to our kids. What we really want to do, much as we model other forms of self-care for our kids, seeking help and taking good care of ourselves, sleep is one of those things we really do want to model for our children, not just in our behaviors, but in also how we talk about it. They should feel that sleep is one of the most essential things. As much as eating nutritiously and getting good exercise, it is that important, and we have to model that for them as much as we can. So, Corey, I don't know if you want to get that video going, or should we just move on?
Yeah, can you hear me? Am I like
Yeah,
am I
you're
back
fine.
now?
You're totally back. We missed you.
Okay, let's see if I can get it to work now. Sorry about that.
That's okay. There you go. No sound.
It? You can't hear it?
Mm. Can
Can you hear me?
Yes. That's okay. Maybe we just move on to the resources.
Yeah, it won't let me share sound anymore. Sorry about that. I even got on early to practice this and it worked fine.
What time did you go to bed last night? Just
Early,
kidding.
plenty of sleep. Okay, I can try it again at the end, but
Right.
we'll go to these first.
Yeah, so just a couple of quick little things that we hope could be a little helpful to you. Sometimes it's hard to know what a good bedtime is for a child, depending on their age. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine has a really useful tool for this. It can help anyone, including adults, determine their ideal bedtime. You put in the age, the time the person has to wake up, and then you click calculate, and it'll give you a good sense, a good recommendation of what time to go to bed in order to optimize health. There's also a lot of apps right now, which, you know, a little counterintuitive because we don't want our kids going to bed with a phone. So, you know, if your child is going to bed with a phone, then these are some things that can help, and they can help adults too. But my preference is to keep these out of the room actually, and just let your child read a book with a little nightlight. But one very useful tool is an app called Calm. It's very popular. It has a lot of good features in it. It you know, gives good tips on mindfulness and is a sleep aid. It has things like sleep stories and soundscapes or soothing noises and stories that can help somebody fall asleep and stay asleep more consistently. It includes a sleep check check-in feature for you or your children to kind of determine what some sleep problems might be. It has guided meditations, breathing exercises, etc. There's a free 7-day trial. It costs about $70 a year, but for students, it could be less, about $350 a month. And it's even covered by some health insurance plans. So it could be useful for people, kids and adults who are actually having quite a hard time falling asleep. So we don't just want to completely ban it. It's probably not the first line of intervention, but if someone is really having a hard time, those soothing noises, the white noises, those meditation techniques or mindfulness techniques could be quite helpful. Another app is called Peziz. It's approved and recommended by the United Kingdom's National Health Service. It does something similar. It has music, voiceover, sound effects to make like sort of white noise, helps people calm their mind, fall asleep faster, stay asleep better, and wake up a little more refreshed. And it can be useful for especially young people who tend to have problems sleeping due to their racing minds, thinking too much. So it can enhance sleep for people who are really having a tough time after other methods have been tried. And then finally, as always, we like to share our own resources. Partnership to End Addiction, the focus of our work is obviously not sleep specifically, but we have tons of support and resources for parents on talking with kids about difficult topics, managing behavioral issues, managing, really anything that comes up that could interfere with a child's sleep, potentially lead to substance use or other issues. But these support groups and helpline and personalized text messaging are really quite useful for parents, and all of this is free and available to anyone who signs up. Just go on our website, drugfree.org, get support, and you could see all of that right there. And then we will leave you with our contact information, but we'd love to open it up to any questions anyone might have. And if you do have a question, sometimes I've encountered this, it feels a little maybe personal to ask in front of other people. Please do jot down or take a screenshot of our email addresses and feel free to send them to us, and we'd be happy to answer after the fact as well. And please look at Not My Kids resources as well.
Yeah, I see that Caitlin put the YouTube handle for Not My Kid in the chat. So you can, if you've missed some of our other monthly webinars, the videos for those are in there. So you can catch up and watch ones that you might have missed, as well as watch other videos that Not My Kid puts on there.